Morning, Mike.
Okay?
Good. Morning, Mike.
You doing well?
Yeah, doing just fine.
Good heavens. There's a lot to read.
Yeah.
Can you see it up here?
Barely.
Maybe you need to go get your glasses.
I might need to. I looked over it on.
John.
I can do that.
Hey, Mike. How are you? You doing okay?
Eight o'clock.
Closer, closer.
I'd like to officially call to order this meeting of the Parks and Downtown Improvement Corporation meeting, and I'll start by asking Mary McCoy to bring our invitation.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for our blessings that you've brought upon us. Please help our committee to make good decisions for our city, to hear the words and the wisdoms from our city members, and to go forward with all haste but due diligence. Please help us all as we go through this weekend and keep us safe until we return the next time. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you. At this time, if you'll stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. I really think we should have a pledge to the Terrell flag, but that's for another meeting. I'll work on that. At this time, I'll ask our members to review the minutes from our prior meeting, held Friday, December 9th. Once you've had a chance to do so, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from December 9th.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. As we move into new business, I'll remind all of us to be sure our microphones are turned on. Should we have comments or questions? Hopefully we have an audience outside of this room on the Facebook world as well. Thank you for our guests that have joined us today. I hope in due time you'll all be introduced. It's good to have a full room. At this time, we're going to discuss our 2023 calendar and goals, and I'll call on Raylan.
Okay, real quick, good morning. And yes, you do have a house full today. So I wanted to present to you kind of an update to what you had last month. We've added a couple of meetings. When we wrap up the presentations today, I'm going to go over the community engagement timeline and what that's going to look like. But I definitely wanted to highlight to you some additional meetings that we've added to your already busy schedules. So you will notice a couple of town hall meetings. We've got February 28th and also April 25th. But prior to those, you have presentations just like the one today, where you'll be hearing from the consultants. So really, the piece that I want to add before the consultants start talking to you about the projects is I would like for y'all to think about, as you listen to these presentations, it's going to help staff and it's also going to help us prepare for the town hall. If you can start thinking about what are the comments or questions that you would like to hear back from the community. So as the Paddock Board and also the City Council being the policymakers, we need to make sure that we're hitting those points to get you answers from the community that's going to help move these projects ahead. I think the biggest thing with the community is just so that they understand the magnitude of the projects and not just the funding, but the phasing and the amount of time it's going to take to complete these projects. And so we're going to have to constantly be mindful of updates so that when you're on the outside and you see nothing happening, you actually understand what's happening in the background. So just one of the main keys as you listen is kind of listen as the board, but also as the community, if there's extra pieces that we need to be adding or certain questions that we need to probe the community with. So your calendar basically stays the same, except for those 2 town hall meetings. And then obviously with the project updates, we plug those into your regular meetings. And what that will do is it's going to feed into your planning in May. So once you come in to do your capital plan work again, you would have had the 2 town hall meetings and some consultant reviews. And so hopefully we're doing a lot of information gathering right now, which is going to help you with budget planning. So do y'all have any questions about changes or meetings? Okay, that was it.
At this time, if you'll look in your packet on page 6, we'll discuss our financial update. Mr. Sims.
So I'm very happy today because we are going to introduce a staff person you haven't met before. Her name is Shelley Wallace. She recently was promoted up to be our finance manager. She's very capable, and she's going to be taking a lead role with you in discussing some of these financial reports that you see. So I'm going to ask her to come on up, and she'll give you a presentation on your financial point of view here. And I'm going to even say this. Shelley's the kind of person, you don't even have to be nice to her. She is tough. So you just hit her with any old question you like, and I think you'll be pleased. So thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Shelley Wallace. I am the finance manager. And today I'm going to present to you the December 31st financials for Paddock. Right now, we are completing the first quarter of the year, ending December 31st, 2022. And right now, we are pretty consistent with budgeted revenues, which are mainly consist of the sales tax portion that is allocated to Paddock. We had some interest income, and this is interest that is generated from the investments, from an investment pool that we will place that money in and earn some interest. However, we are looking at transitioning that probably to one of the Texas pool investments, whether it be Texas Pool, Texas Term, or Techstar. Right now, their interest rates have increased significantly, actually, since we've come through the pandemic. So I think we could probably earn a much better return on the funds. We had few expenses in December consisting of the facade reimbursement program. Those are starting to trickle in right now, as you can see. We haven't had very many expenses. Projects are kind of still in planning phases and getting started. So probably by the time we do the next update, we'll probably see some more expenditures hit our financials. So right now, we are only 1%. We've used about 1% of the budget as it relates to expenditures, and so we will definitely see that increase overall. And that's pretty much it. So for the month, our net income, meaning our revenues less any expenditures for the month is $90,438. Year-to-date, as you can see, since we've only had expenditures occur in December, that is our year-to-date number as well. However, we do have sales tax that we have generated or received for the first quarter, and year-to-date, that's $292,896. So for the quarter, of course, we have net income as we have significant revenues compared to expenditures or monies going out. With that being said, are there any questions right now?
Can I answer one question kind of ahead of time, and that is, hey, what about the $3.5 million that we borrowed and we're methodically spending out on that series of projects like the lights over at the different parks and the bathrooms at different parks? One of the things we're going to be adding in your next month financial report is just a little snapshot that shows you how's the spending on that $3.5 million, because that's also an important part of your financial picture. So I just kind of want to preemptively answer that question because I'm sure it was on your mind.
Thank you. Any questions, Ms. Wallace? Is that right? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Next, we will discuss downtown and Central Park projects. We have a Central Park now.
We're gonna keep working on the name of that baby. Listen, there's a long history on this thing, and I won't belabor it, but you know, as far back as 2017, our downtown plan that was adopted at that time said, hey, we really need a place where we can focus some investment as we try to say, hey, where's the center of downtown? There were recommendations made in that plan to locate some civic facilities around a town square area. As we studied that idea after the adoption of that plan, that idea got bigger and bigger. So now the battle plan is to really be on this path that we've been on for a couple of years now, where we're trying to figure out, hey, what could we do to make sure that we have a big unified downtown where whether you're on one side of the railroad tracks or on another side of the railroad tracks, you got a unified city. And when people come and visit the city, they look at this and they say, hey, this whole thing looks great. And the thing we've used as an example for a long time is you shouldn't be in a city where when you drive from one side of the railroad tracks to the other, it looks like you changed cities. You're not in the same city anymore. That's the problem we're trying to solve, and the Central Park idea is a major component of that. The other major component of that is the simple thing to say that, sorry to say, the building we're standing in, it's not really going to stand the test of time, right? It's served its purpose. There's several other buildings we own that have served their purpose, so we're always looking for, well, where are we going to relocate a series of civic buildings? And the town square is also the answer to that. So the consulting firm working on that is KSA, and I'll invite KSA to come up and walk through this presentation.
Morning, Chris Basham. We've been working with the city for almost about a year now, getting on with this project and stuff. The downtown Central Park development is progressing very well. I'll let others talk to the acquisition. And do I have slide control here? This kind of got started about a year ago when we took several members of the city council and we went down to Houston and we walked several parks in the Houston area, looking for what we liked and lessons learned that we might bring back to Terrell. McGovern Centennial Park and Rice University were the two big parks that we looked at, and we learned a lot of things from there, and we've taken a lot of components that were on those parks and are working those into the plan for the Central Park here in Terrell. Some of the things we're looking at, you see the big green space in both Rice University and the McGovern Centennial Park, with walkways around the park, around the edges. We're still looking at that. We're also looking at the covered walkways. You see the trellis there at McGovern and the arched walkway, covered walkway around Rice University. Some of those same components we're working in a Terrell translation of that. So we're working on that right now. The land acquisitions that are in process right now are going to be followed up by surveys and also what infrastructure is going in there. Infrastructure that'll go around the park. And for that, I'll turn it over to Mike, and then I'll be back to close out what else is there.
Mike Burns, KSA, Glad to be here. I'm the gearhead engineer part of this team. He's the planner architect, bad cop, good cop. I'll let you decide which one's which. My slide starts right here, and what I was tasked to do is look at your infrastructure in this part of Terrell that has been there a while. And can it support the growth that is anticipated, part of this downtown Central Park area. If you just see the slide here, I'll just start from the right side, work my way left, a little opposite than what's on the slide, but we looked at the street development around the Central Park area. You'll see a slide cross-section of an 80-foot right-of-way. That's going to be the main thoroughfares. In the drawing, they're the purple. We anticipate, now this will change over time as we develop and things start happening, but we're anticipating 80-foot right-of-ways, which would give us plenty of traffic maneuverability with 2 lanes, and what we're showing is parallel parking. That could change, but enough behind the curb space for pedestrian and landscaping use to kind of enhance the area around the Central Park area. And the streets that are in green, it's kind of hard to see, but those are 60 foot. Those would be a little bit less supporting streets that would come to the Central Park area. As you move kind of to the left on the drawings, the water, we looked at the water that's there. Of course, it's older systems. We anticipate a 12-inch loop line. It's good to know that the city has plenty of water in that area. It's just a matter of replacing some lines, removing some lines, and putting a 12-inch water line around the Central Park to supply enough water for the development in that area. So the water is not a big concern for us and the city at this point in time, but when you get to the sanitary sewer, that's going to require some effort to get enough sewer coverage for that new development area. As you go out of the area, it goes, if you can see, it kind of goes this way. That's where all the discharge, it follows the drainage way. The sewers will have to be upsized and extended all the way to a 15-inch line that the city owns. So there's a little more extensive work to do in the sewer, and we can't really do a whole lot of that until we know heights of buildings, density of growth, but just looking at it from a 35,000 level now, there's a lot of work to do on the sanitary sewer work to get it compatible to handle the development work. Again, all this will be phased as it develops. We don't have to do it all at once. It's just a matter of trying to do it as we kind of go along and know overall what we need to accomplish to get to the end line. And then the drainage is going to be even a bigger challenge than the sanitary sewer, because I'll go to the next slide. This is a slide from a previous consultant, Friesen Nichols, who did an overall city master plan of your drainage several years ago. This is the watershed that the Central Park and the downtown area is located. And if you can look close, we're kind of in the south part of this watershed, but it even shows now there's flooding up the little green areas, blue areas, depends on what color, are places where water stands when in a significant rain event. So we want to mitigate that. We want to fix that as we go forward with any development work.
Fill in a couple of blanks here, sorry. Yeah. So as you're looking at that slide, take a look at the bottom part of it where it says Rochester Street, right? So right now today, if you go out there and look at the corner of Virginia and Rochester, what are you going to see, right? Just on the north side of Rochester, you got a really big open channel, right? That open channel carries a lot of water, but the culverts that lead to that and are back and forth north and or east and west of there, you know, those are like little straws, right? And you got to imagine there's a little straw underneath of State Highway 34. There's a little straw underneath of the railroad track that's the rail spur that runs past and crosses Temple, right? All of that prevents water from getting out of this zone. And the far western side of this zone is basically right at the edge of Southwestern Christian College, right? And so this goes as far south as probably, 1 or 2 blocks south of Newton, and it goes, you know, pretty high up north. All of that drainage, and particularly this southern drainage that we're talking about here, if we don't fix that drainage problem, then I got 2 problems, okay? If we don't fix this southern drainage with that red along Rochester, I got 2 problems. One is you're going to have nothing but a puddle in the middle of the town square. right? And then if you don't fix it, you also can't ever transition those streets in that area from open ditch to being in culvert, right? One of our big goals is taking that whole zone, and I mean the area that doesn't have storm sewer, all the way from, say, Delphine, going all the way back to Southwestern Christian College, north of Newton roughly, all the way up to the railroad tracks. If we don't fix that problem in red down there, if we don't get that water under 34, under the railroad tracks, and actually all the way past Gardner, if we don't get that water out of there, then we can't build streets with proper curb and gutter cross sections in that zone of our city, right? So one of the big things that we're trying to get done right now is to figure out, okay, exactly what's the right solution to that problem. That's a big priority area for us. So it's going to stop down there because that's one of the most expensive things we're looking at, okay? Don't mistake that when we're pointing at that and we're saying, hey, the pipe under 34, the pipe under the railroad tracks aren't the right size, that's alert, big deal, okay? We have serious issues we're gonna have to tackle there. Sorry, I just wanted to highlight that.
Good, he did it. I'll just add to that, anytime you have a, storm sewer or sanitary, it's gravity flow, and you gotta do the downstream improvements first to work your way upstream for the stuff that would happen in. So that's what he's talking about. There's a lot of work in the overall watershed to get it fixed or corrected as we go along, but you got to look downstream and work your way back upstream, and those are at pretty good cost as we go forward. That's all I had. Chris, come on back up.
Bad news is back. Bad news back. So I just wanted to refresh also the, it's too far. No, I didn't, okay. One of the second things that we're doing as we're developing the park is trying to set some guidelines for development. And we're building off of what you've got for the whole downtown area right now so that it meshes together and works together. When we look at the, this is not the right slide. I'm sorry. I skipped that slide earlier. Sorry about that. So we have three concepts under the next steps. One is this schematic development, and we're laying out concepts for the park. Not only the big green area that we talked about earlier, but what happens in that green area over time. So in addition to trying to delineate how big the park is, which is roughly about 300 by about 900 feet of green space, what happens around it, what happens in it. We're trying to get it ready for events that you already have in Terrell, that you can hold those events at this new park. There's some other things that we picked up from the Houston visit, like the day markets, where people come in. I remember being in London, England, and around Hyde Park, and every weekend you couldn't even hardly get to Hyde Park because all around it were day markets where you could sell and buy just about anything, craft-wise, art-wise. It was quite an event and went all weekend, 2 days. I could see that happening, too, around the park. We also talked about the promenade, and how that goes through the park, probably down that center line, which is along Catherine. We're also looking at the possibility of pocket parks, so that the big area is also surrounded and encompasses some smaller pocket parks that are specialty parks for whatever they might want to be. And then we talked about the covered walks around it too, and how that works into the site. The second task is to do guidelines and development standards, and that's what I was saying is we're working with the current standards that you got. That ties into the height of buildings that Mike was talking about. The height of buildings that get built around it and that are supported by it also affect the water, sewer, and all of the other infrastructure utilities. And then the third part of this thing is we're tied in with the library that's being studied right now and where that might go in the park area or around the perimeter of the park. So all that is part of what's happening right now with the Central Park. All that's being cross-coordination, and we're looking at pollination when you'll see some other projects with the street projects that are going on, the quiet zones, the stuff that's happening around South Alley, the British Museum. All of that is being taken into account as we start to pull all this together so that the Central Park is surrounded by a lot of good things that are happening. And this is kind of where we're at the point right now is how do we get to that clean, level, and continuous green space in the center of the 8 blocks, create some kind of exterior walkway or sidewalks, put some basic trees and landscaping so that it's usable as soon as possible. And that's kind of where we are right now, and we're moving along, but we wanted to make this presentation to you guys and ask any questions that y'all might have, answer any questions.
One of the things that, I'll let Councilwoman Velasquez, go ahead.
Hey, Mike and Chris. I do have a follow-up questions for the infrastructure improvements. So what I'm hearing, and feel free to add on anything I may have missed, it sounds like what we'll need, the major upfront costs is a 12-inch water line at this time.
Actually, the beginning, I think, was going to be, as Mike said, was going to be storm drain
Right,
improvements.
the drainage.
Because there's nothing we can do to develop the Central Park area because of the drainage issues that they have without doing something first for that downstream area that goes under 34. And that spur railroad, those culverts are kind of a choke point. And there's different ways we can look at improvement where you can actually put the infrastructure in to mitigate the flooding problems that are happening in that area. So I think drainage is one. The water lines, I think we got plenty of pressure, plenty of supply in that area to put water lines in as the development grows. It's the sanitary sewer and the storm drain that's the biggest challenges.
Right, thank you for that. And do we have the boundary lines for the proposed drainage study yet? And if not, I'd love to see that before you come forward to City Council.
I think what we have from this view is the overall drainage, but from that is our sub area, which is on the south side. And we have a proposal to the city now to do a drainage study to specifically look at the challenges in this drainage area for the Central Park and determine what are some alternative improvements we can do to lessen the impact of costs.
I always like to underline what the paddock board is being asked to pay for versus what it's not being asked to pay for. So in the city's stormwater fund, budgeted for FY23, there's a $500,000 engineering study, which is intended to be the let's get started on getting the real details, not just talking about it, but the real details of exactly what do we need to build. That drainage study picks up from this southern chunk right here. So you see where it says Rockwell and Grove, and there's blue flooding in that area on that map, right? So think of the $500,000 study as being the first bite at the apple of studying all of that to pick up from sort of that Rockwell Grove area, which would then allow you to go all the way back to Southwestern Christian College, and then go forward to follow that pipe under 34, under the railroad tracks, behind Builder's First Source, go up over to Gardner, and then get past Gardner. If we can get past Gardner, we've got success, okay? So roughly from Gardner all the way to Southwestern Christian College, we need to figure out what the solution is, and that's what that $500,000 study under the city's stormwater program is all about. So that's stormwater, the fee that shows up on your bill every month, that's part of where that money goes.
So, and Mike, I don't think I heard you say, was there a southern boundary to the drainage study that we have at this time?
I would say that this map shows as good as I can do for you on that. So that kind of jigsaw little pattern on the south where it turns from grayed out to being just the aerial. And I'm going to tell you that follows, that's a little south of Newton, the street just next past of Newton. I'm going to ask Leonard Lancaster. What's my, Dallas, right. Yeah, you go down to Dallas, right? So you've got a couple of streets there south of Newton, but that's about as far south as that goes. If you go look at this overall map, what you would say to yourself, okay, there must be another drainage area called KC5, right? we got plenty of drainage problems in the area the consultants called KC5, right? That's another whole zone to be tackled. And that, you know, that's a lot of land area, that's a lot of problem, and that's just next step, right? So as I've said before, what we've got to do is we've got to look at 34 and the railroad tracks and methodically go from one end to the other of State Highway 34 and the railroad tracks and just get about the process of solving those problems. We don't have enough money to grab all of them and do all of them at the same time, but, you know, we can do one at a time, and we're going to go tackle this particular one right now.
Is there any reason why we can't use the drainage studies that we already have in place?
I would say that it's probably unfair to call it drainage study. What it is, it's an engineering project, so we can have a completed set of plans to go to a contractor and say, build this now. And so we'll figure out, you know, this says, hey, in general, you need these things. Now the step is to say, you know, what are the exact specifications, and get a plan book that's this thick set up, that's basically all the blueprints for all of the pipes and all of the everything that needs to happen in that entire zone. We'll send that out to bid. Right now, we're terrified that we think the estimated cost of that project is about $9 million. And, you know, we're just going to go through the steps of creating those plan documents. So it's really the nitty-gritty engineering now that we're doing, so that council will have the ability to really go out to bid on that project.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Anything else on that agenda item? If not, we'll move on to discussing the quiet zone and complete streets update. Mr. Sims.
So I'm going to introduce Nathan Ante. You've seen him before. He is the consultant working on kind of leading the effort on complete streets and quiet zones. You've heard a little from him before. J.C. Jackson's kind enough to be our representative on our project review committee that goes out and meets with COG and TxDOT and with our other coordinating agencies on this. So appreciate your service doing that, sir. And we're going to get an update from Nathan on where we stand.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you all. Good morning. Like you said, I'm Nathan with Kimley Horn, and I'm going to be presenting some of the progress that we've made to date, and then really a review of what we presented to the Project Review Committee last month. So a lot of this for Mr. Jackson won't be new, but it's an abbreviated version of what we presented to show the progress that we've made. Raylan said, over the next month, what we're really preparing for is taking this to the public and preparing some illustrations of these various options to get some feedback and developing surveys along with that. So as Raylan mentioned, as you're kind of listening to this and hearing about these different options, be thinking about some of those questions that we might want to put out to the public. So just to back up, the Project Review Committee, again, was made up of city staff, Mr. Jackson, TxDOT, the county, COG, UP, and then the consultant team, Kimley Horn, and then JBJ, who they are also helping to lead the public engagement activities with city staff. And we held that first meeting with TxDOT at the Dallas District Office, and that was on December 5th. And then we've got another meeting set up for March 2nd, and that's intended to be after this month-long process of gathering some more information, refining some of the details, and also it will be after the open house, so we can present that information to these same stakeholders. So what we did with the Project Review Committee is we talked about a lot of big picture initiatives and things the city had already had underway, like the downtown plan that was adopted in 2017, the work that y'all had done from a work planning standpoint, the stuff that KSA and team have been doing with the town square development, just to let everyone know how the quiet zones and complete streets fit into the bigger picture. So we stepped through the town square. We described what was happening with the South Alley, the British Museum, Birch Street, Bowser Circle, which are kind of defining the limits of the project that we're asking their input on. Walk through all the quiet zones through the downtown area. Talked about some various parking lots. And then we focused in on the downtown quiet zones, and why those were important and how they interacted with the alley and how they impact what we're doing on the streets. And then we focused on the streets themselves and defined the limits of what we were asking them to look at. And this graphic's one you've seen before that shows various colors. And the purple is what we're calling transition zones into the urban core. And then Spur 226, that's on the eastern edge of the town square, Central Park area in blue. And this was the limits of what we were asking them to look at. And we focused a lot of our time on a number of different options in the core zone. So I'll step through that as well. And this is a blow up of a map that you've seen before. This was really where we spent the bulk of the time because there's a lot of challenges and opportunities within this core zone. We also shared with them a lot of the desired outcomes that have come from y'all and from city and from the public over the years as a lot of this has been developed, and wanted to make sure everyone on the committee understood that these were important to the community and important to the city, and that we'd be validating and also getting more feedback from the public, so we'd be adding to these. But things like giving the small business a place to launch and grow, baby stroller friendly downtown, safety, and blending the north side and the south side of the railroad tracks. This kind of set some of the tone on what we're looking for. And then what we presented to them were some draft guiding principles. And really the intent of these principles was to make sure that the committee could help use these to reach a decision at the end of the day. So we've got a lot of opportunities, a lot of different options. But with any option, we want to be able to point back to all of these and say, this is why we picked this option. So develop a big vision for downtown, improve mobility, safety, comfort for all modes of travel and ages. So whatever outcome, whatever section we choose through this downtown, we wanted these to be some draft guiding principles. So, and then finally, this is a scope that y'all have seen before, but we just described that we've got a timeline. We're trying to reach a decision so that we can get this engineered. And there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of different tasks, and a lot of parties involved. But we're on track, and we're about midway through, and we just wanted to describe to them what our scope as a consultant was to see if they had anything else to add. And then we described some progress to date. So just so you all know, we've done a lot of work, like Raylan said, in the background. There was a lot of work leading up to that project review committee in December. We had to survey nearly all of the downtown corridors from a utility standpoint. And I'm talking about field on-the-ground survey that we could use as base for engineering. So identifying where all the utilities were, where all the property lines were, where all the boundaries were. And so we've established a base, and we've been coordinating with KSA and the other consultants to make sure that's all joining together. We've also made some quiet zone recommendations, and I know you all have seen those in some previous presentations. But what we've done since then is we've engaged the railroad. So they have seen those, we've priced all those, we've developed some concepts at every crossing. We've actually got a meeting set up with the UP next week to start the diagnostic. And the concepts we developed aren't set in stone, but they were provided to the UP for feedback so that we can keep refining those. So those included improvements at each crossing, which to improve safety, medians, so that in the downtown area, the horns could stop blowing. But we got to make safety improvements through those. We've also done a lot of traffic studies and coordinated with COG and TxDOT. So I think y'all may have seen some traffic counters out there. We counted all the traffic in the spring before the summer. We've analyzed all the existing traffic and the movement. So we've developed models on these various scenarios that we'll show you to show what we are proposing, how that would impact traffic. And I think the high-level consensus and recommendations were that no matter what option we choose in the core zone, it may impact circulation, but it will accommodate the traffic now and in the future. And I think that was a key point, that one of the very first questions that TxDOT asked at the Paddock board meeting is, Are you removing lanes, or are you proposing to make it a 6-lane roadway through your downtown? And I think we were not. 6 lanes just won't fit within the core zone, and the volumes don't suggest it need to be that even now or in the future. And we weren't proposing to take it from a 4-lane down to a very narrow street, so they were glad with that. We've refined the options. I'll walk through this, and then we've started to talk about the public engagement strategy. So again, this is just a summary page of all of the recommendations that were taken to the UP. They're going to evaluate them. We're going to meet in the field next week to walk every one of these and look at what the impacts are to start that approval process. And then we step through pictures of what the corridors look like to really illustrate the challenges and what we're trying to improve. So, of course, Spur 226, you can see it does have a median in some places, but no sidewalks, a lot of utilities, a lot of driveways. And so our proposed section, very consistent with the downtown master plan, is to add medians, which would allow for trees and lighting, but also improve the walkability and add sidewalks, which would tie to the town square. So pretty straightforward there. And then on US 80 East Urban Transition Zone, this is leading up to the downtown area again. You've got some parkways, some shoulders, but no real sidewalks, not a lot of parking, very wide driveways, and not any medians. So what we were proposing there was very similar to Spur 226, a divided 4-lane roadway to meet TxDOT standards with a little bit wider lanes that would allow for sidewalks. So a lot of challenges there to get that to fit. But the good thing is you've got the right-of-way. There are just some utilities to work through. And then finally, where we spent the bulk of our time was on the core zone. And we illustrated, we showed these pictures of the challenges today. You've got parking, you've got a lot of traffic through these 4-lane roadways. In fact, I think y'all have modified the striping on the parking to allow for a little more room. You've got a lot of steps and walls, and they all recognize the challenges with this. So as we were looking at the core zone, we presented 5 different options. And with each option, there's a little bit of variability in terms of lane widths, but the big picture is the 5 options. So I'm just going to step through these briefly, and then we can come back and answer any questions. And if you'll look at the 4-lane median dedicated left turn lanes parking, that's how we differentiate between each of these. So option A is essentially what you have today. 4 lanes with a median, stoplight at every cross street, left turn lanes, and very narrow sidewalks. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on this because going back to the guiding principles, it didn't do a whole lot to improve walkability. And it's a very tight right-of-way to fit all this in, as y'all know today. So didn't spend a lot of time on option A. Option B, very similar to option A. The big difference is the parking is removed in the core zone. And what that did was allow for much wider sidewalks. So that is the only difference between A and B. The next 2 options, options C and D, are also very similar. One has parking, one does not. The big difference between those are the median is narrower or even non-existent. And what that means is you wouldn't have dedicated left turn lanes at all the side streets. So this one would have the most impact to circulation. But what it would do is still allow parking in the downtown areas and still get wide sidewalks. I think the challenge is you've got 100 feet, and to get parking, sidewalks, 4 lanes, turn lanes, something's got to give. So that's the difference between C and D. C is with parking, and D is without, with a narrow median and no left turn lanes. So going back to the traffic, all of these will accommodate the traffic now and in the future. That's based on the traffic studies. They do have some circulation impacts. They do have some intersection improvement impacts, but generally speaking, they all can accommodate that. And then the final option that we talked about, which has the most significant impacts and some challenges, but also possibly some pretty significant economic development opportunities associated with it. And that is the one-way couplet option, and that's changing US 80 to be one-way eastbound, and then converting Nash to being the one-way westbound. And that's 2 lanes in each direction, so it's still accommodating 4 lanes of traffic. It's just diverting it to Nash Street. So obviously, this one has a lot of impacts from a property acquisition standpoint. Very similar to downtown Louisville. If you all are familiar with downtown Louisville, they've done this, and when you convert it to just 2 lanes, you've got 100 feet of right-of-way in your core zone, so that would allow for a lot of parking still and wide sidewalks, but again, significant impacts. And again, this would be Nash Street, so that's the challenge is if this remains an on-system TxDOT corridor. Nash is not a TxDOT corridor, and they typically don't like utilities in their corridor, and there are utilities on Nash Street, so finding a place for those is a pretty significant impact. So where we're at now is we want to just gather feedback and input. We're going to do that with the town hall meeting. We're creating illustrations that are less engineering-like to show what these existing corridors look like today and what they can look like based on each of these different options. And we're also pulling representative pictures of other downtown areas, not just in North Texas, but also all over the U.S. to see examples of what it could look like when you remove parking or what it could look like with the one-way couplet.
So I just wanted to hop up and say, just sort of a point of clarity. You should say to yourself, man, it looks like a lot of work has gotten done, right? They've been out, they've surveyed, they've measured, they've met with TxDOT, da-da-da-da. And then you might say to yourself, well, wait a minute, when does the public start getting involved? The standard process is you don't want to go out to the public with an option that your grant agency is just going to say no to, right? So the reason that we vetted, the reason there was a meeting where, J.C. Jackson's going out to TxDOT with the consultant team and Raylan and Chris Knapp, why is all that happening up front? We're making sure that we preserve federal and state eligibility for funding for all of our different options. So now we can go to the public and we could say, hey, these options have been vetted with the grant agencies. These are things that would be grant eligible. And that's a huge part of this because I guarantee you everything Nathan showed you is expensive. And even though you've got in your capital plans to make investment in complete streets as a paddock board, even though we've got some county bond program money, that's going to be much better used if it's the local match to something much bigger. So we want to make sure that we preserve that eligibility. And we're talking about $15–20 million worth of funding. We've got to be obedient to the federal process. And so that's why we didn't run out to public meetings. First, we did our due diligence, and now we get to go out to public meetings. So I just wanted to clarify that part of the process.
Nathan, quick question for you.
Yes.
When we look at the drawings, the curb area between the buildings, it's flat, and ours isn't.
Yes.
How do you accomplish this with the steps that we have downtown today?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'll try to describe that maybe on this option B. So again, option B mimics very closely to what you have today. It's just you've removed parking. But you're doing more than removing parking. You're rebuilding the entire right-of-way. And so what the parking does in an area where you've got 4 lanes of traffic, it provides a safety buffer between the pedestrians and the traffic. And so when you remove that parking, how do you still provide a safe buffer between those pedestrians and the traffic? And the way to do that, sorry, I'm not sure if I can point on that, is you'll notice you've got 15.5 feet now of pedestrian walkway area. So this is what we plan to do in the public is show some representative photos of within that 15-foot zone, that 2 to 4 to 6 foot zone right behind the curb is where you can make up some grade with planter boxes, with trees, with landscaping. So then what is left facing the building, you're left with about 10 to 12 feet of flat flush area that aligns with the thresholds of the doors. As opposed to when you're really constrained and you only have 5 or 6 feet and your curb's down here and your street's up here, you just don't have a lot of room to make that grade. But when you have 15.5 feet, you can accomplish it by creating that buffer behind the curb where we don't really want people to be walking right up on the curb when you've got traffic next to it. You do planter boxes and trees and create a softer buffer, but you can also make up the grade with steps there. Gentler slope, yeah, yeah. And then that way you still have your ADA compliance of a flat sidewalk. And it's wide. It's wide enough to have not just a walkway, but also for cafes and places for the building fronts to have tables and things out there.
Questions or feedback for Nathan?
I have a question. So, and maybe I imagined this, but I thought that there was at least one option that instead of parallel parking had pull-in parking, and I thought that that was paired with the one-way couplet. Was that something that was ruled out, or?
That's a really good, I don't know that it was ruled out. I'll just say on option E, you'll notice this is, let's say, one-way eastbound on US 80. What this one is showing is basically 2 lanes. You're left with about 26 feet of sidewalk on both sides. That's a lot of sidewalk. So this is showing some parallel parking. That parallel parking could be angled or back in or other type of parking, and it would just take away from the sidewalk. So
What is the difference between, I see here we've got 11 foot for parallel. What's the difference between a parallel spot and a pull-in spot in terms of size?
I think that would, instead of 11, angled would probably be another 5 or 6 more feet into the parkway. So that's in downtown Louisville, that's what they've done. When they went down to one way, that left a lot of sidewalk area, so they've got a lot of angled parking in their downtown.
And my comment on that would just be, particularly as we get to younger generations driving, I work in a town that has both parallel and pull-in parking, and I will tell you correctly. And so you lose a lot of parking spaces when you have parallel, in my opinion, because there are so few people that can use it properly. And the issue we have now with our parallel parking is the traffic's moving so fast, nobody will stop to let you do it. They'll run right into the back of you. So I think that that's something that should be, heavily factored into whatever model we go with, which lessening the traffic will also slow the speed theoretically. So
That's a really good point, and we're seeing more and more as
Parkway. What's everybody using right now? What's like the standard parkway that allows for a table outside, or some chairs, a stroller, people still walking by?
18 to 20 is what we're seeing as kind of ideal. 21 is great. I'll say on option D, this one again is the option where there's no parking, but also no left turn lanes. So you'll see there's still a 4-foot median buffer. There's some variability in there. You can go even narrower, or you can actually go a little bit wider and take some space from the parkway. Maybe it's 6 or 8 feet wide enough so it could be landscaped and treed, but not wide enough to have pocketed left turn lanes. So this is one where generally we're just not doing dedicated left turn lanes, but that 4-foot median could go down to 1 or 2 foot, or it could be as wide as 8 or 10 feet to balance out the parkway if the 21 feet's too narrow, and if we want trees and shade down the median. So
I remember you saying too at an earlier meeting that more trees downtown naturally slows down the traffic, feeds your vision to a certain extent. For the public comment, that's something to talk about, but I think there's value in that.
yeah, and that is something that we plan to add to these graphics when we render them. These don't show trees down the median or along the buffer of the curb. So those are things we want to build off of, because because we wouldn't really have 21 feet of all walkable area. There would be some buffer there that would be trees.
Even if it's follow-up email to have like a city that uses, you know, option A, option B, option C, option B, we want to see where we have some clear, how they
Relatively split.
Agenda for this morning is to discuss the community engagement plan, and for that, I'll call on Raylan.
So just real quick to kind of give you an overview of next steps for everyone. We are obviously here at January 27th, and we're trying to get to our last town hall meeting in April. So I want to clarify the town hall meeting that's coming up in February. This will be focused mainly on quiet zones and complete streets. We gave you a little briefing of what's been going on downtown and some of that planning, some of the planning pieces for the green space. So we plan to take that to the public in April with exhibits and just have a better idea of next steps for that property. So this first portion, again, is really going to focus in on just quiet zones and complete streets. One piece I wanted to add is that we do have some community engagement pieces also occurring in the background for our library and community space. And so Becca's here today if you have any questions about that, but you will see on the schedule some interviews and just some different things that are going on between now and the next time you get an update, which is going to be in April. So when we come back in April, that's going to be in preparation for our April town hall. And at that point, you're also going to get updates on South Alley. You're going to hear from the consultant with the library and the community space, also the downtown. And that's when all of these pieces are going to come together. And we'll also update on quiet zones and community streets. So we say all projects, it's everything coming together in April. But we really kind of wanted to break away quiet zones and complete streets first, so that we could focus in on mainly the goal for USA. So if here, if you have any questions about what's coming up, we'll always
management.
They are prompting, getting the flyers and everything ready, gathering the information with Kimley Horn. So they will be reaching out a couple of weeks before the town hall meeting, and then also doing follow-ups after we get community input during the meeting that day, and then they will still, during the entire month of March, during the online survey, that's when they will be in the neighborhoods. That's the 30 days that they'll spend getting input, inviting people to take the surveys, etc. So we'll have a lot of information gathered when we come back.
Okay. And does it sound like, let's say we have a community group in the audience, and they, hear about JBJ Management is going to meet with community groups. Should we direct them to you? Should we direct them directly to JBJ management? In the
Yes.
future, say, hold on, we'll.
Yeah, no, so part of the piece is going to be if you're interested in having someone come and talk to a group, the contact information will go through the city, and we'll make sure that we have someone present with the materials so that we can make presentations. So we will have requests for presentations, so, which I think is going to be helpful if there is a group that wants to get together, that we can definitely accommodate.
Thank you.
100% of the purpose of JBJ management is to make sure we do a great job talking to everybody who wants to talk and give input related to quiet zone, complete streets. That's the first bite of the apple because that's the project that's moving ahead in line first. And so that's the first round of community engagement.
I have one additional note. As always, I'm going to request the surveys, whether they're online or on paper, in English and Spanish.
Absolutely, that's part of the services. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
My understanding, we don't have any executive session items. Any other comments from the board? Do we have any requests for public comment? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.